I'm gonna start this recording. And then I know there's only like a dozen people so far tuning in, and I'm gonna finally gonna buckle down and make like a series on this because I feel like I've got enough data here to support this. So I want to start by talking about Nvidia, right? And so guys don't already know, the market has just basically been driven by the semis, the semiconductors, and Nvidia specifically. Like whatever Nvidia is doing, is what matters, right? And so going into the open, yada yada yada, right? We got a series of lowers, highs. Guys squawking. We got a series of lowers, of highs. This, that, and the third, right? Notice that like around the same time where the market bottoms, Nvidia filled and then closed the 10-minute candle right on the gap fills. Went through it, came back up, settled right there. We're wicking down a little bit and starting this big move up. And when, of course, when it like retraced up, if you actually were to just like draw a fib on the whole day, you see we did a golden zone retracement on like the whole day. But typically speaking, like once you fill the gap, you will see some like price action here. And then like if it's going to be like decisively weaker, we might see this continue to trail off. But unlikely considering how strong Nvidia has been, especially if we had this area of consolidation. So it might just be like, bounced, wicked under it, reclaim, and then go, or we're going to come down. But regardless, that's just like one piece of this. However, the big thing that I want to talk about is NQ. So, um, let me go. I'm just gonna go to a completely clear chart, right? No EMAs, none of that. So we can just look at like totally just look at price, and let's go to a clear drawing set, right? I mark my gaps from bell to bell. So that's the close of the 1550 candle on TOS. Also the close of the 1600 candle on NinjaTrader, and I think on Webull, right? Because different companies aggregate their candles differently. You just want to make sure that it's when the bell rings, that's the price that you're marking. Okay. So if we go from the close at 4:30 to this open, right? Look where we get our first bounce was at 60%, right? And then the alternative fib levels here, they also come into play. So we're looking for 0.2 and 0.382, which sometimes will be okay. So you see that like this, even on the 10-minute, is just like picture perfect. Goes here, goes up to about the 23, and then it flushes. If you didn't have those fib levels or you weren't using it, one of the greatest things about this morning was if you marked the orb high to the orb low, or the high of day to the low of day, you got a perfect golden zone retracement. Also on this short, there were like two reasons to go short there. Now, look at what happened specifically on NQ, right? We hit this gap fill to the like tick. Like this shit was perfect. Okay. We can go down to the 1-minute chart and look what happened on the 1-minute, right? On the 2-minute chart, you'll see like this is what happens, and you get this push up, right? Come down here, you hold a slightly higher low here, right? Because again, look where the candles close. And then I would say you have a trigger long here risking this. And if you had, enough room, you could risk that, which this might be 05. This would be like 25-ish total points risk if you were risking just under the low of day. But you've already had confirmation that they can't push it down lower, right? Because look at the strength of this engulfing bearish candle, right? You get this 2-minute CBC flip, and then there's no follow through. All right. And you're already very, very extended. And if we look, start with the EMAs. If we look at it with the 2-minute chart with the EMAs, right? Do I have house stack button? Oh, I do. Look at this. It looks just like Maple's charts, right? So here's your 2-minute chart. We've done the Maple setup, right? Here's your 2-minute 9, right? So how many times we were just feeding off 2-minute 9, 2-minute 9, a little bit more of a pullback, right? And this was perfect too. This 50%, right, pushes up. When the 50% fails, right, it bounces off 61, does this little ping pong, which happens all the time in between here to here. This was orb low breaking base with 2-minute 9 EMA confluence, 10-minute CBC was still short. It flushes back down, and then you get what? The pullback to this 61. So they broke under 61, they retouch it, and then they flush all the way down, and it's just literally like you could draw it out like a line here to here to here to here, and then where you're going to go next here. Like even anywhere in here, somebody might be thinking, oh, this candle seller exhaustion. I've learned through testing this so many times, right, that this is not like a seller exhaustion candle. This is just, hey, they reloaded, they pulled back into here. We're going to go to that level. Like most of the time, we're going to go to that level. Now, the most important thing that happened at the same exact point in time, right? This is 11:16. Go over to the VIX chart. Put the VIX chart on the 2-minute, right? Here's your gap fill on the VIX, right? 11:14. We wick over at 11:16. And then you get this inverted hammer here. So both of them at the same time on the same 10-minute candle hit their gap fill. VIX's 4 p.m. close was right here. Here's the 11 o'clock open. In the pre-market, I said it's VIX versus 15. VIX versus 15. Repeatedly kept saying it's VIX versus 15. This is your London session. They reclaim the orb low. They push through the London orb high, and they hold the London orb high 15. So it was very, very clear. All right, everybody with me? Is what I'm saying making any sense at all? Somebody just, anybody listening? Yes. All right. What's up, Gary? Hope you're doing well, bro. What's up? Okay. So now, right? What happens with VIX? You see, we push all the way up through. We get the gap fill. We come down, and we don't honor the golden zone. When we don't honor the golden zone, really, you got a small rejection here. They bought it back up, and then they just knife through. This was pretty good as well. Here's your previous day's low. So they go under the previous day low. They rebase on it, which is also rebasing on this 50 fib. Same thing. Like I would say, all right, now I have multiple confluences, right? Also, this is a 512 cloud, by the way. I'm also holding, from a bearish perspective, the top of the 5 here. And we push back down. What do? We hit the mid orb, aka the belly button. Well, what's also there is the opening print, right? So we're getting the opening print, which is the 0% line of this gap. So that's why I just said in chat, I said 15.8. I really should have said 15.7 or 15.68, like this area here, previous day low. Now we're coming back down. Are we going to get from like this move, right? Would be a golden zone retracement into here, but really we're going to go back into the gap. Are we going to see a volatility uptick in preparation for the biggest names in the market, or a couple of them, to have their earnings, right? Because we have Apple and Amazon tonight. So the only downside to this, right, which or a concern that we should have when looking at all of these, I'm going to put just this is the MTF cloud right here. This is like so the only downside we have to studying this and reviewing this is if we look at, and I'll put ES on a clear chart. Here was your 4 p.m. close. So you go the rest of my lines. See, we did not fill it. So I will be keeping a very close eye on this area. Oh, I literally will extend this area out for a year to make sure that I don't actually. So this is a very, of course, a very big concern. Now, obviously, we came up and we practically touched VWAP. That's like big on ES. We've all learned from Maple, etc., etc. We know what's going on. They've also had now 2 candles here where they look like they're failing to flip the CBC back short. So it's likely we could potentially just sit here in the balanced range and chop until the close as we are in the golden zone of the high of day. Okay? And we're sitting right here on this MTF. This area. Up, except all that stuff. But when everything is so heavily tech lately, you're seeing that the NQ gaps are, and getting these gap fills on either one is important. Now, usually we don't get a gap fill on all 3. So when we got a gap fill on 2 and ES was looking the same, and then we got the tweezer bottom, that was really kind of everything you needed to know for, hey, the short is exhausted. In chat, somebody asked, and I'm glad they did, because they asked before we got to the 2-minute 20, they said this 2-minute 20 pullback will not be good, or they said something like that, right? So they said, this one will not be a good one or it'll be dangerous or whatever word they used. And I said, yes, because you've just filled the gap, which is a major shorts target. So now shorts have hit their target. And what's going to happen? We're going to get some covering, right? And then we got the 10-minute CBC flip and you had a nice move here. What happens here is, what do? We push back up into, when we get back up into the 50%, look what happened, right? So I'm gonna end up creating like a whole video series on like how I trade gaps. Handle it's 1 p.m. But this is basically like a precursor to the whole thing, like having it marked out and watching the price just sort of move from area to area to area back, and that's exactly what happens. Now, I'm not saying this is like totally driven by algos or whatever. I'm trying to get into that ghost in the machine bullshit, but you can just see this play out time and time and time again, and it happens on multiple tickers, right? So the 2 minute was really clean, showing probable reversal on NQ. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was just saying a few minutes ago. Was that like you had that 2 minute CBC rejection out of it's the 512 cloud, but out of here, this 2 minute flips back short, and then you get the hammer here off the bottoms. Like there's no follow through. Like that's it, right? And so a chaser is gonna get bagged under here, right? If you're waiting for like so much confirmation, like I don't know if it's gonna break low a day, and then you're like, oh, I should have shorted it off the 2 minute 9, but I'm scared because the 2 minute CBC is long, which rightfully so. It might keep pulling back more. And then you take it down here because you're like, oh shit, it did move. I should take it. It's gonna go break the low, and then it doesn't, and then you're stuck. No, all good, Nini. Like, cause like there was conversation in chat about I know it's just gonna be like a long and like potentially dry series, so I'm gonna just break it up by like different tickers and just showing everybody like the historical examples of it. But I know that there was a lot of talk about ES filling the gap or whatever because it goes to the high of day, right? And then so if we clean this up and we go on a straight clean chart, no EMAs, right? And another one with nothing drawn already. Like this was the high of day. This little this was the high of day going into before 4 p.m. close. I guess, and then if you went off of this was the high of day if you look at the daily chart, right? But it just doesn't line up. It doesn't compute. And that's kind of how I really figured this out, was like the things that compute, the things that make sense, right? So now you see, like, look how we're spilling off. And I'll be completely honest. I thought that this was a short. I wussed out of it, right? I wanted to, I legitimately go back to show you guys exactly where I was looking. I legitimately saw these 3 candles off of here and this one come back down. I wanted to take the short here. And I just wussed out of it because I was like, oh, I don't have enough confirmation yet. Maybe that's me wussing out of it, or maybe that's just me trying to have a little bit more confirmation to let a trade play out. But then when I did end up taking the short here, and I was out before I started this, whatever, it was a very quick 25 points. Boom, boom, took it. Right? Because I wanted to see us, see what happened. We're going to get under this candle. Yeah, we push back. I'm not base hit and move on. All right. So now if we look at, and I'll go back to all 3, right? So looking at bases loaded type triggers. I know somebody probably will be like, hey, your all-time high levels are wrong. Just for what it's worth, I don't move them until the next day is closed, right? So in this case, we made a new all-time high in after hours and everything after yesterday's session. So when today's session closes at 5 p.m., I'll move the levels up. Then, because sometimes we'll come back down to like a day or the old all-time highs, and if I move them, then I won't have them there, and I'll be like, why did we bounce there? Oh, duh, it was because we were still at that level, right? Like you see, for example, like ES just like knifed through it. Here's the all-time high we had in pre-market, just went up, came back down, and it like retested this bearishly. Not now, it did. Comes back down, tests previous day's high. You get a bounce. It doesn't break the 512 cloud. Like get the 10-minute 20 rejections here twice. This probably threw people for a loop. then it just flips. So NQ golden zone test. Yeah, from the low to the high. I'm sorry, from this move. Yep, from this move to this move. But like this is where, and I'm not gonna say like, hey, I'm not trying to say or influence anybody going short, and I don't think going short here, where we are right now, is a wise decision. However, if I was already short or still short, and I had maybe if I hadn't taken a mini and I had taken like 10 micros, I would have scaled the majority out and held one with a break even stop, which wouldn't have got hit, and I would just say I'm going to target this because most of the time what happens on these moves is we get the gap fill, we come back up and retest this area, and then we flush. And I think if I go, yes, we did the exact same thing yesterday, and we did it on NQ as well. So here we have this gap up from the 28th into the 29th, right? And I'm gonna go. How's the easiest way to me to clean this up? I'm just gonna turn off all studies. Move all studies. Okay, so it's just like clean price action and just my drawings. Okay, so you have this gap up from the 28th into the 29th, right? And then I've been noticing you'll get like percentage extensions, right? So like 100% retracement is the gap fill. Then you get like 200% retracement is often a good target. There was an old gap here that got filled. When this old gap here got filled, look how we pushed out of it, came back and retested, finally flushed through it. But this gap here is what I'm trying to call your attention to. If we look at this open to this close, right? When we filled the gap, if you look at the golden zone of this gap, which was not retouched, the golden zone of this gap was not retouched after the gap was filled. Look where we hit yesterday. Like freaking picture perfect. Picture perfect on this gap fill between the 50 and the 61% fit is right there. And then what happened? Where did we flush to? Right? And I'm going to put the 400% on because this has been, if we hit the 2, sometimes we hit the 4, and I'll add one day on here so they go over more. We end up going past the 400% mark. So like once we hit this and we close under the gap, then we get to the 200, 300, 400. I mean, this probably even went 500% in terms of, yeah, exactly 500%. It's pretty wild. And like, if you're already in this short, like it's just like, all right, scale trails, scale and trail, right? Scale and trail. That's what people have been saying. But the point of looking at this gap is when we have the gap up and then the gap gets filled, we will retest the golden zone. And if we do not break back over the golden zone and retest it to go in like this fashion to go back up, we will retest. We will do what we did here, which is where essentially we broke under it, we retested it, we broke down lower, right? Like that's how we followed it, right? The same thing happened on NQ, and of course you'll see it on like SPX or whatever. But the same thing happened on NQ, but it happened earlier in the morning, and I think some people probably remember talking about. Here was the gap up on NQ, gapped up, came back down, right? Did it hit? Put these on. Did not hit the 2. But gapped up, and then this is where we had the rejection yesterday, where I left to go to the same exact zone. So when we got that play on NQ, oh well, it happened on NQ, and then they couldn't push up to get out of it. What's likely to happen? Right, when I'm seeing this price action failing, yield strong higher highs and higher lows, and then we get this massive wick up, and we start flushing back down. Like in here, it was like, oh no, we're gonna go at least here now. So and just have a better mindset of kind of like where the market is likely to go, because when we're pushing like in waves, market will move in waves, right? So like, and I was really trying to get an understanding as to like why we would have bounced here, and the only thing that I could come up with was related to where SPX bounced and just filling that once we filled this gap, hitting this one. Will be cool if you gave us some worksheets on gap on the timing to discuss. Okay. Yeah. I'll put it out kind of like as comments onto the YouTube video so that way we can like just have the discussion on there. Would actually help me out. Patience are good. So, anyways. Oh shit, I thought Depp was saying. Um, let me see like if there's another example. Yesterday's all-time highs. Yeah, we talked about the gap filler there. Yeah, here's a good one. This one, like, it works like both ways. So we get the gap up here on NVIDIA from, this is the 28th close to the 29th. We gap up. It pulls down just a little bit. And you see that it's defending the gap. And they defended the close here already in pre-market, right before the open. Pulls down just a little bit and they push up. And then they push up and can't break the pre-market high. But this distance of the gap, this like dollar and some change, that's like what negative 100% means. It just means like another like a measured move, right? A measured move of the same distance of the gap. That's where they break over and then they reject, right? It rejects from there. It goes all the way down, right? And what happens, look, you see like we get the gap fill where we nearly get the gap fill. We pull up to the golden zone and then we flush. And then we hit the 200%, again, the measured move. So this one went measured move both ways, right? So like, we're never going to know what the market is going to do, and I'm not going to presume to try to say that, oh, if you mark the gaps you'll know where the market is going to go, because sometimes these gaps can take weeks to fill, or in the case of AMD they've taken over a year, and I'll show that in a second. But at least by like having these marked, if you're day trading or intraday trading like options, right, you know, I would be like, if I went short right on anywhere in through here like a pullback or something, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go short. Like, where am I gonna look to scale? I'm gonna look to scale here, right? Obviously, we got a low day break, right? Scale in here, scale at the gap fill, and then final. That would be like another final target. Plus, this is 175, like big whole dollar psych on a name like that. I'd be looking at that too. And really wasn't anything far to the left here, but that they just help with having price targets, and they seem to be much more than reliable than orb extension. What's the measured move mean for newbies? Just like like I was explaining earlier. So like if this move from here to here, from the close to the open is $1.22, then we would be looking at a $1.22 upward and then $1.22 downward, right? So that's all that means. These are like identical lines. Just the same. It's the same from open to the close. Now, if you look at like AMD's chart, is a freaking mess with gaps, because it's just been that's how it's just been trading lately. This gap here that we filled yesterday, 2 days ago. This gap originates on July 16th of 2020. Show you on the daily where. So like this is why like anywhere I have all these little orange circles is just to call attention to like, look what happened when it hit a level, right? So in this case of this green one, green gaps are Friday to Monday. On a Friday to Monday gap, you see that we gapped up, right? This would be 100% retracement, and it pushed through and it fills the little bit that's left, because what happened was we gapped up and then we gapped down, so we gapped over a gap. You'll see it on the daily in a second, and then it creates like this weird like void where there is no volume. Watch NQ is still moving lower. See that on my other monitor. So you have this, right, and it just, again, it pulls back down. It doesn't come back down and touch here, right? Multiple attempts, higher low, higher low, higher low, showing you signs of strength. It's already filled this gap, so you know we're likely to go back over it, right? So going into the close here, especially on such like a very bullish day, and you're having this overall flagging action, or but you can just see they're holding higher lows. The trend line is showing you. I would think, okay, like if I'm long and I've got enough time on my options, or if I get shares, I feel comfortable holding this because they're showing me they're holding higher. Now, like in here, this was just literally to show you the overlap, which was just finishing off the purple gap, right? Because truthfully, I would normally adjust the purple gap to be like only have like this little bit left, and then it comes back down and fills it. Because of the purple gap that we would have left, we would just have from this 100% line to here now, because we've been encroaching on that. And what happened for this purple gap? We encroached all the way to the golden zone. We rejected just over the 61 fib and flushed. So that's a scale trigger. That's a double scale trigger, because I have the green gap getting filled, and for the purple gap, I'm encroaching on its 61% fib like it's golden zone. So like this has helped me a whole lot more targets, and just I should trim some here. And I definitely would have probably already trimmed some here just as we push closer to it. Again, depending on what you're trading. So when that purple gap is completely filled here, pushes up through, it's filled, it draws down a little bit, draws down to like pre-market high area. That area is holding your very noticeable strong higher low. Good. But next day, gaps down, fills the gap in one shot, barely comes back down to retest it, then doesn't come back. Now, up again. Gap up, fill the entire gap in one shot. Up, we push up into the golden zone, right through here. It dips down a little bit, giving you the sense that it's going to fail off. It doesn't. It turns around, goes, pushes all the way back up to the open. But where do you get that rejection? Again, so if I was long, that's a target. The opening print is always important. Comes back down, chops a little bit. Now we're looking weak. We're going to flush through the other way. The other way, what happened? Affected that golden. So I was going to take, if this is going to perish, but AMD's going back to the 1-day chart. Like, yeah, this chart's a mess because it's just been, AMD's been super gappy. We had this big gap up. It came back down. It touched the golden zone of the gap right here. So big gap up from 171, $3, pulls back halfway, launches. Within a few days, it breaks. It rejects a different unfilled gap up here, right in the golden zone. Golden zone rejection, golden zone rejection, golden zone rejection. So now what I'm watching for, obviously, is if we get into this 187 area, we get back into this gap, we can reclaim and hold this. Might just continue pushing. But we've got earnings, and we could just literally plow right through it. But for that green gap, what you'll see what that happened is that we ended up we created this purple gap down, which is the Wednesday gap. And we gapped down from 177 to 169, and we did not even put like any sort of upper wick on that. So we had such a strong gap rejection that very high probability that the first time we encroach on, or first time we enter the 50% to 61, the golden zone of that gap, very, very, very high likelihood that we're going to reject. And like looking at it and zooming in like super close, we didn't, this is the low of day wick here. So we opened up here and just flushed, right? We had a gap up and then we filled it like immediately. I didn't even draw it because again, there was so many, but we left this little bit of green on in addition to this purple. And so that's what we were doing here just a couple days. Through, hits, closes right on the purple 50%, gaps up over, comes back down to the purple 1%, up, comes back down, a little bit that's left over. I know it's a lot. I know what it all means. Here's Mondays to Tuesdays gap up. Okay. We left from here to here unfilled, right? As the purple gap and the green gap were filled and respected. Back down and tested it yesterday off of open. And it held. Okay. It didn't fill. This is an unfilled area showing me buyers have strength 74. So I'll keep. Then like this, the full 200% measured move have been just under the gap fill. We didn't hit it. Here's the like the measured move to the other way, right? So gap down, measured move back up, here. Really purple gap. Okay. Can't build and push back down. 1, 2. Making sense. Thanks, Reiki. All good, bro. Yeah, dude, that was good. That dude. Honestly, this NQ just looks like it's gonna H over. I'm telling you. At least it's time stamped. It's on voice. Like I don't get any extra points. I don't need any attaboys or pat on my back. But I said just from like studying and reviewing this price action, it's likely that we're gonna do this. And there was just too many confluence. Failed bill breaker, not getting all the way to the 20s, etc. Just too much to not think that we're. But that's it for me. That's all I really got for today. Unless you have any questions, I'm gonna go. Yeah, those lowercase h patterns are friggin' awesome. Yeah, Nini. First. I'm just gonna put. I'm not even gonna try to draw that, Robbie. I'm just gonna throw. Yep. Yeah, I scaled under this one. So when I grabbed the short here, like seeing this, weren't reclaiming the EMAs. Grab the short here, or it just took. Ranking, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'll get this uploaded on YouTube, buddy. Also, before I forget, I'm gonna share with you guys in the skilled floor in a little bit. There was the psychological session that was shared from like Justin Werlein yesterday, and he had like a counselor on there with a woman with a master's degree talking about self-sabotage. So that video is only going to be posted, he said, on his YouTube for 72 hours. I recorded it and I'm uploading it to a unlisted video. Oh, Robbie, you downloaded it. Good stuff. I'm going to upload it to an unlisted link so that way you guys can watch it whenever is convenient for you, and then it'll be there. I thought it was pretty insightful. Had a lot of good things, but ultimately, you know, trading is a you versus you game, and you got to figure out what's plaguing you. So, all right, guys, we'll do this again soon.